All right, today I want to talk about practical uses for local storage. What I'm going to do is I'm going to build a little app here where somebody can enter in a couple of pieces of information, name of a TV show, name of a character, click save, and then I'm going to save that data in local storage, and I can keep adding more and more characters. If the character is for the same show as one that's already entered, the character will be added to that one. If it's for a different TV show, then we'll create a new key. So just to show what I've got here in local storage already, I have 3 keys here, and they all start with the same thing, Steve shows app. So this is the first part of the key, which is going to be the same for every single entry that I make. Then after that is going to be the name of the show. Each one of these entries is going to be an array. So local storage, you can save anything that can be saved as a string. So numbers, booleans, strings, obviously, and we can also save arrays and objects as long as those arrays and objects can be passed through json.stringify and turned into strings. So just like this, these arrays have been stringified and we're saving them to the keys. So every one of these has a different list of values, and these right here, these parts of the keys, this is going to be our navigation menu at the top. When I click on these things, I'm going to create down here in the footer a list of all of the characters that exist inside of the show that's selected. So that's what we're going to be doing here. And I will shrink this over a little bit so we can see the whole screen. And jumping into our code, in the HTML, I have my form. So 2 inputs, one called show, one called char. My save button, btn save, the header and the footer, this is where I'm going to be putting those lists, and I've got the one JavaScript file and my one CSS file here, so this describes what we're going to do. If you want a copy of all these files, there's a link to a code gist in the description down below so you can follow along as I'm doing this. So my CSS, some basic styling, nothing really important in there for what we're doing, and the way I'm writing the script is I have created a namespace called app. Inside of there, I have a series of functions. Each one has a specific role, and DOM content loaded, that's the event that we're waiting for. When that happens, when the DOM is ready, we're going to call our init function, and it's just going to add listeners. So the save button and the header, where the links are going to appear, they will have click listeners to call different things. So we'll walk through these functions and build them in the sequence that the user would be seeing things happen. So save char, I'm going to do that one first. I've got a little bit of starter code in here, just a few lines. What we're going to do is we're going to get the show and char input fields, get their values, trim them off to get rid of any extraneous space at the beginning and at the end. Then we're going to save those in variables, and if we've got both values, so basically we're just checking to make sure that the input fields were not left blank. If they're not blank, then we can start to work with this. So what we want to do first is we want to get a key. We're going to look in local storage to see, hey, is there already a key that exists that matches what we're doing here? So I'm going to take my key base right here. So we'll say app.keybase. And then we'll add to that, I'm going to take this value show right here that came out of the input, and we're going to convert that to lowercase, just to standardize it because people may capitalize show names differently. So we'll always convert it to lowercase. I can use to lowercase, I can use to locale lowercase, whichever one I want. Now, this is going to be the key in local storage. If we look back over here, these keys right here. So Steve shows app dash whatever the name is that they've provided here. So that's why we have the hyphen at the end, because we're adding on the name of the show. Okay, so let's get the local storage. We'll find out if there is something that actually exists with that name. Okay, so this could be null. There may not be anything with that key, but there could be. So we don't know yet. We're going to check to see if it exists. And I'm going to have an array that's going to hold my characters. So when I come over here, this array of characters, I'm going to put it into this variable, chars. So if storage exists, that means that there was something there. It could be an empty array, it could be anything, but we're going to take whatever was in there that matched it, and we're going to put it into chars. Now, this could have been undefined or null, and this would work. The empty array is here just to make sure that if there's nothing there by that name, we still have an empty array, so we can still treat it as if it is an array. Now, whether it's an empty array or whether it was an array that existed over in here, we want to take this char value that came from the form and we're going to put it into that array. So we will say push char. So this is going to add on that new character name from that. Now again, we could have duplicates here. There may have been the same character already entered, so we want to make sure that we get rid of those duplicates. And the simplest way to do that is to convert it from an array into a set and then back into an array. So we'll say new set, we'll pass in chars. So we're taking chars, the array, converting it into a set, which will remove all the duplicates, and then we're going to convert it back into an array. Now, chars right here, this is an array that matches all this plus that one extra character that was just entered. So we need to update this. We need to overwrite whatever was in there. Or if this was brand new, if it didn't exist, we're going to create it right now. So local storage, we're going to call the set item method. It needs a key and it needs the data. Key we've already created up above right here, and we're going to pass in json.stringify of chars. There we go. Now, the only thing that we didn't do, if it existed already, was this part right here. So if there was no storage, we're still going to be pushing it into the array. We're still going to be trying to remove duplicates just in case, and then we're going to stick in the new version into local storage. Okay, so that's going to add. We've got that first part working here. We can add into our arrays. So let's do this one right here. We've got two values inside of here. So if the TV show Archer, let's add Krieger in there. There we go. Krieger has now shown up inside of here. So we did update this. Great, that works. What next? Well, since there are lists of shows right here, what we want to do next is going to be take the list of all these keys and we're going to remove the leading part, the Steve shows app hyphen. That part, we're going to cut that off. We're going to take this list, and this list is going to become our navigation menu right at the top here. So we're going to do that right at the end of this every time we update. So we'll call app.loadShows. This is where we're going to build that navigation menu at the top. I'm going to call it here when I update it, but I also want to call it when the app originally loads. So at the very beginning, so the user can actually navigate without having to fill out the form, we will do it here as well. So two places that we're going to call this function, which is going to build our navigation menu. Local storage has a property called length. This is going to tell you how many keys there are. Well, we've got 3. So I'm going to get 3 as the answer. I could have had other stuff for this domain in here as well. So I'm going to need to filter this based on ones that are starting with this value. But we're going to start with the length. That's all of them. Then I'm going to do a for loop. So as long as I get a number here, so basically as long as this isn't 0, because length will always give us 0 or some larger integer. That should be I equals. We're just going to do a very simple loop. As long as it's less than that, I plus plus, just your regular old standard for loop. Local storage, in addition to the length property, has a method called key, which is going to give us the actual name. So as we loop through, we're going to get this name, then this name, then this name, and other names if they did exist. For each one of those, we need to look and see, hey, did it begin with our value up here, this key base? Did it start with this? If it did, yeah, that's one of the ones that we want. This is why it's very important that this part is a unique key. We want to make sure that there's nothing else that's running on this domain that will ever use that as the starting value for the key. Okay, so we're in here. We're going to check if key starts with, and I will use app.keybase instead of writing it out to just avoid any typos on my part. Starts with, returns a Boolean, yes or no. So if it does, I will take the key right here, whatever that name is, and I'm going to push that into my app.keys array, which is also up here, this empty array. So I'm pushing it into here, and this is going to be what I loop through to build that navigation menu. Okay, so we have all of our data. We've got that array of keys. Just for the heck of it, inside of here, I'm going to, once we've created that array, I'm going to sort it. Not necessary to do, but I'm going to sort it just so the names of the shows are in alphabetical order. It'll help people to visually run through the list. And not build chars, but build nav. This is going to build the navigation menu, which is why we were coming to here. Load shows gets called, if you remember, when the page loads, as well as every time you save a character. Okay, so moving on to build nav. Now I'm going to, inside of here, clear out everything that was in the header, clear out everything that was in the footer, because the footer stuff's only going to show up when I select an actual show. I'm going to create a document fragment as my sort of empty container. I'm going to put all of the new links inside of there, and then I will append them to the nav. And at the end of this function, the footer is going to be cleared out, so there's not going to be any of the anchors that are actually selected in there. Okay, so in the build nav function, in our loop, to loop through all those keys, the ones that we just built and sorted right here. So we've got a list of keys, we've sorted it. They all still have that Steve Shows app at the beginning. So we're going to take that last little part, and that's going to be the piece that we write out in the nav menu. So I'm going to create an anchor tag. In my CSS, I've got a class called show. That's what I'm going to use to style these things. And we're going to set its text content. So inside the anchor tag, the text that we want to show up is that app.keybase removed from, well, not the app.keybase, it's everything except for the app.keybase. So this last little piece, we're going to remove that. So we call key, right here, the key that we're looking at. We'll use just the replace, and I'm going to replace app.keybase with an empty string. That, whatever's left, is going to be just the name of the show, and then we can append it. There we go. This is going to build that navigation menu. And now actually we should have something visible showing up. There we go. The CSS is capitalizing each of the words. That's something that's in the CSS file already. So no matter how they're typed in, they're going to match this. We're saving them with lowercase here, but we're formatting them with uppercase when we put them out here. Okay, now the last part of this is clicking on one of these links to make the characters from that one show up down below. So that is going to be our load char and build chars. If we come back up here, we can see that there is a query selector on the header, or an event listener on the header. When we click anywhere in the header, that means on the anchor tags, we're going to call load char, because I need to know, okay, which one did you just click on? That's the one that I'm going to go into local storage and get this array. So let's come down here, load char. This is the one. Hey, okay, ev.target. Where inside that header did you click? Did you actually click on an anchor tag? If you did, okay, this is where I'm going to do these things. I want to put the name of the show into the input field so I know, okay, this is the one that you just clicked on. It's just going to make it easier. If I click on this link right here, I want this to show up. If I click on this one, I want it to show up here. If I click on this one, I want it to show up here. Now, somebody can always delete it and type something new, but you click on this, you see the list of the characters. Okay, now I'm going to add one more to that show. That's the thinking. That's the user experience that we're going for here. So we will do that first part of actually putting it in there. We will take the text out of our link. So we know it was the anchor tag. So if we get the, sorry, not equals, if we get the text content, we're going to be grabbing what was written up there, and just to make sure, we're going to convert it to lowercase. Then we're going to put it into that text field so we can actually take a look at it. So get it by ID, and it was called show, and its value is going to be show. Okay, so I can test that now. Oh, got an error. Something's mistyped. Oh, yeah, I got an S for element by ID. This should be singular. There we go. Okay, great. So we have these showing up inside of here whenever we click. Great, that's the first step. Now, we're going to remove the active class. This is something that we're going to also be adding as the user clicks on these. We want some sort of indication as which is the one that's selected when we write these out. We're going to be adding an active class on here. So we also need to remove the active class when we click on something different. So these next two steps in the comments right here. Now I could do this all in one line, but it's better for our code if we check to see if this thing exists. I put it into a variable. If the variable exists, meaning if this thing actually exists on the page, then we can remove the class. So instead of just writing old active or document query selector header A active class list remove, instead of just doing this, because this thing may or may not exist. Now I can use optional chaining to do this, but optional chaining isn't supported widely enough yet that I would want to do that. I have a video on optional chaining if you're interested in that. I'll put the link down in the description as well for that one if you want to find out about that. Okay, so we have the old one removed. Now we can add the new one. So we're just styling really the link that we clicked on. So whichever anchor tag we clicked on, we're now setting to active. There we go. And you can see just with the CSS, I'm just adding an overline on the top and I'm changing the color just slightly. Okay, now to build the stuff down below, down in the footer, we want the list of the characters. There we go. So I'm taking this value that I put inside of here that I got from the navigation menu and converted it to lowercase. I'm going to add that onto the end of the keybase because it was lowercase in the keybase. Another reason to convert it to lowercase. I'm going to take that, try and get the storage. If that exists, if there is something in there, which there absolutely should be because we used it to build the navigation menu, but just in case, it's always good to check. It's always good to put an if statement in there. And what we're going to do is call our final method and pass in this array This is the array that we're going to use to build the menu, same as we did at the top. Make sure the footer is empty. Document fragment we're going to append everything to, and then we are going to just create spans. Span just because that's what I have in my CSS. You could make it an anchor tag as well if you wanted. These ones aren't something that anyone's ever going to be clicking on. So for that reason, I'm only going to make them spans. Give them a class name for my CSS. Take the character name and put it in there, in the footer, and append it. And there we go. And that's the whole thing. So I can add somebody to Archer. There we go. The new one's been added. Every time I save, I deselect one of these so the person can select on something again afterwards. Oh, one thing that we did forget to do is when we save, we want to clear out our form. That's another step. Something I skipped over. So when we are saving, right up here, save char. When we save the characters, our last step in that is going to be clearing out the old values. So after we have the character name and we've saved it in local storage, before we build the menu, I'm going to set its value to an empty string. So both show and chars, or char. There we go. So Archer, and we'll add somebody. Can't do this without putting Lana in there. There we go. It's cleared out, but Lana was added. Lana is going to show up in local storage right here. And there we have it. So there's some practical use cases for local storage. Hope that helps you out. And as always, thanks for watching.